Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir. Hello. Hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Sorry, sir.
Madam, if we have Dr. Vinod Babu joined us,
Yes, sir.
we shall start the session. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Vinod, have you joined?
Sorry, your audio is mute. Sir, please unmute your audio.
Can you hear me, madam?
Yes, sir. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Mahendra, sir.
Yes. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on approach to manufacturing system. Does it matters and what's missing? I welcome you all on behalf of Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. We have with us Dr. Soumya Einstein, who would be the coordinator and moderator for today's webinar. She's a physiotherapist, co-founder and administrator of Physiotherapy Jobs Portal, Bangalore. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
We have a speaker who's a very well-known person to us, a good friend of mine, Dr. Vinod Babu K, professor in physiotherapy, principal, Gautam College of Physiotherapy. I welcome you, sir.
Good evening. I'm audible, madam?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay, thank you.
Your video is paused, but
Madam?
your video is paused, sir. It's not
Okay,
moving.
okay, one minute. Is the screen is visible? Or
Yes, sir.
for the screen share?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right. So I hand over the session to you, madam. I would like you to start the session. We are
Thank
full
you, sir.
house and we are Facebook Live, and I'm
Okay.
sure we are reaching many more participants. Thanks to Dr. Vinod Babu, who's going to share his knowledge with us and help us enlighten our profession. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here to participate in the webinar organized by Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. And thank you, Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation and their team for organizing continuously the webinar during the COVID for the benefit of physiotherapists. And today topic, is approach in myofascial system. Does it matter? What is missing? Hello.
Hello, madam.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
I
Thank
request.
you.
Yes, sir. I request all the participants kindly mute your audio and video mode. I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Vinod Babu. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you very
And
much, madam.
yes, sir. He did master in physiotherapy, musculoskeletal and sports, and short course in educational methodology from Rajiv Gandhi University, Karnataka. And he did MBA in hospital administration. He's currently working as a principal in Gautam College of Physiotherapy and Rehab Center, Bangalore. He's the executive editor in chief, International Journal of Physiotherapy, and it more than international publications in peer-reviewed journals, and many articles are indexed in Pedro. He's a well-known national speaker, and he did a lead talk in national level physiotherapy conferences. And as a resource person, he trained more than 3,000 physiotherapists in various workshops at national and international level. So topics such as manual therapy,
Renu,
taping technique, core stability, and exercise training, Pilates, physiotherapist for
the video.
osteoporosis, and role in cancer rehab,
Huh?
and integrated myofascial release techniques, dry needling,
The
acupuncture,
Bengal
etc.,
technique.
etc., etc. It will go like that. And he is a member of International Society of Physiotherapy Journal editor, WCPT Australia, and is a life member of Karnataka Acupuncture Association, Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation, and Indian Association of Physiotherapists. He received many awards for his excellent contribution in academic, clinical, and research works, like Best Teacher Award in Physiocon 2014, Bangalore, Scroll of Honor Award in International Conference, Bangalore Physiocon 2017, and Bangalore Physiocon 2018, organized by South Canara Teacher Association, Bangalore. And he received Dr. Einstein Jerome Memorial Excellency Award in 57th Annual Conference of Indian Association of Physiotherapists, Bangalore. And he's one of the intelligent, hardworking, and very, very honest physiotherapist I have seen. Welcome you again, sir. Hello.
All thank Dr. Mahendra and Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation inviting me for this webinar and giving me an opportunity to share the knowledge related to myofascial system. I'm very much thankful to Soumya Einstein madam for giving me a brief introduction about me, and also I thank all the participants who are participating for this webinar through Zoom, and also for the Facebook viewers who are watching this webinar on the Facebook live stream. Ma'am, before going for this, I wanted to
Yes.
check my
Yes, sir.
audio is audible clearly.
Yes, the audio is clear. Your video is not coming. What slide
Okay,
share is
video.
there, sir?
Yeah, there is some I need to enable, but again it takes some time, I think.
It's
So
okay.
I hope PowerPoint presentation is visible, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can see that.
Okay, then. I'll proceed further.
Okay.
See, why I choose this topic when it goes to this, the approach to myofascial system. Does it matters and what missing? Really, it was a big question for me many times when many physiotherapists when approaching to the muscle pain. So then I felt there is something required and updates how exactly they should go for an approach to the uh, treating a patient with myofascial pain. So that's why I selected this, and I wanted to discuss regarding my views on this myofascial system approach to all the viewers. So before going to this webinar, I would like to inform about the disclaimer because I used many images, text, and materials which is used from the presentation collected from various available resources from the literature. It's not owned by myself or by the organizers. And the images, whatever is used in this webinar, it's only for illustrative and educational purpose. It's not intended to reproduce or retransmission or redistribution or republications or any financial benefits in relations to the images used. So I also disclaim that no liability for any consequences related to directly or indirectly to use of the images or any source of information through this webinar because it's only for education purposes. Now, let me take a case scenario before moving into the topic. So I request Sai Mendra, our host, I would like to ask one full question to all the participants who are watching through the Zoom. So, Sai Mendra, are you there?
Yes, I am here, sir.
Is there any possibility to release the first full question?
Yes.
Okay. Before releasing, I request participant, before going into the topic, I request that you can answer to the question, full question, and this will be helpful for the further processing of this topic. Sai Mendra, can you please raise a question? Participants, is that madam?
Yes, sir, it is visible. It is visible.
Okay. It's done?
Yeah.
Narendra, sir. Okay.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. A problem related to myofascial system can be solved by treating only myofascial trigger points. So I request participants can take part in this full question and submit it. Yeah, true. Okay, fine. But some of them they says false. Uh, but 87% are very much positive to towards only the myofascial trigger point. Some are around 27.8% are not particular with this myofascial trigger points. It's good. Let's see during this session how this question will help in taking a decision whether trigger point is enough or something else is required in treating a muscular pain. I just share, okay, Dr. Mahendra,
Yes, sir, it is visible.
my video is coming, Mina?
Yes, sir, it's coming. Your video is not coming, but
Okay.
slides, sir, I can see.
Sure, madam. Okay, then. See, look at that. Whenever a patient is coming to you with pain in the trapezius, I have taken this as an example because this is commonly seen case by a physiotherapist and also commonly reported by the patients also nowadays. Why? Whenever the patient comes to pain with pain in the trapezius region, I can mention they may present the pain or generalizing the entire area of the trapezius, or they may be reporting at a specific points in the trapezius muscle. But in this scenario, the approach for this trapezius pain could have various options. I've taken all the options as one only, where it's displayed in the slide, where it can, you may you may think about the option one, whether this pain was reported in the trapezius region to be considered as trapezitis or myofascial pain or trigger point pain, or it's related to fascia pain. But you can take another option one also. Is it the trapezius pain reported by the patient and diagnosed by you is related to the trapezius pain or some other structure? And again, I'll also try to give you the option preference to if the pain in the trapezius is reported, electrotherapy, stretching, or any other combination is good, or with combination of trigger point release or joint or ergonomics, or we can go with the option of electrotherapy, stretching the particular trapezius muscle or stretching. So these kind of several scenarios where everyday maybe physiotherapists may be facing whenever patient comes with trapezius. So I have taken this as an example. I told you this is a commonly reported case, the trapezius pain. Similar scenarios you may also face in other conditions. It could be in the low back pain, or it could be the leg pain or cough pain, thigh region, thigh pain. But I'll take an example. So there are many kind of options which unanswered options left with the therapist in relations to the mentioning the condition name or diagnosing the structure. Is that the real structure or something else? or selecting the option of treatment. Even though many evidences supports in relations to the treatment of the pain, but still there are inconclusion held with the appropriate decision making. But so I wanted to put up this today, what exactly this approach we should achieve in relations to the myofascial pain. Does it really matters, or what is missing? So we should think what we're doing is presently is does it matters, or else something is missing in relations to our knowledge or in relations to our approach. So let me provide you some knowledge, whatever is provided through the sources of literature in today's webinar. Let's Today's webinar, I would like to present to you all first about the approach to the myofascial system. What exactly the conventionally the approach is taken place by the physiotherapist in the treatment of muscle pain, and I would like to tell about later. I would like to tell about the facial system and in relations to the myofascial trigger points when it comes to the muscle pain, and facial system in relations to the myofascial meridians and relations to the muscle pain. And again, I'll be reviewing back what's the best approaches you can practice in your myofascial system when you're approaching to the myofascial system. So these are the four contents I will be covering today's webinar. So first, I will be bringing to you about the concept of myofascial system. See, whenever a muscle pain the patient is reporting, always the eyes is on the particular muscle, or you may be looking into the postural deviations or structural variations. But understanding this concept of myofascial system is a crucial part in treatment of musculoskeletal conditions, because the musculoskeletal system, it's an interactive network of interconnecting and independent tissues. So it's connected with the fascia and all. Therefore, myofascial system, whenever you take, when you are looking into the approach, you are looking into the understanding the concept of myofascial system, or when you're looking into the evaluation part of the myofascial system in relation to the patient reporting the muscle pain, or when you are approaching the treatment part, you can divide this myofascial system into muscle component or trigger point component, where it related to the muscle and specific to the muscle or group of muscle. And you can also looking into the fascia component, where the fascia itself will form the chain systems. Most of the treatments and also the available resources which more focused on the trigger point component, where the muscle. So whenever patient comes to trapezius, the patient may have the trigger point, and you may have to evaluate that and treat the trigger point and release the trigger point. But that is not only sufficient, but you also should look into the fascia component also when you're treating such kind of scenarios. So let's see in the muscle component or trigger point complex component. I'm just briefly coming now with the two components, then we'll go in the detailed information about the muscle component as well as facial component, how you are supposed to evaluate and how you are supposed to diagnose, then what are the changes you need to implement in your practice. Now, muscle component or trigger point component, see this component of muscle where the muscle itself is covered with a fascia. All of you are much familiar with this basics of muscle structure, endomysium, perimysium, and muscle fiber. If you see the molecular level of muscle fiber, there are sarcomeres. The sarcomeres contains actin and myofin. So all these structures are supported very well with the connective tissue, what we call it as fascia. So in the sarcomere level, there are structure which there are points in in the muscle where it becomes in a contracted state, what we call it as trigger point. So this trigger point brings the clinical symptomatology for reducing signs and symptoms in relation to the trigger point. That later we will go through that. Whereas the facial chain component or meridian chain component, where this and the muscles forms a myofascial patterns or chain patterns. What you can see in the first image here, you can see that the image over here where the entire this back line, we call it a superficial back line. This superficial back line, if you see that superficial back line, which is a connection from the head to the up to the metatarsals, where the fascia, the deep cervical neck muscles, then again erector spinae, and here about hamstrings, then calf muscle. If you see the next image, even the calf muscle, which is shown here, and calcaneal tendons, the entire structure it's in a continuity. because this continuity will help in framing framework and also helps in supporting. Similar like this myofascial chain, we have around 78 different myofascial chain systems, which together forms the entire supporting framework in the human body. And this also has a vital role in whenever you are treating patients with muscle pain. Let's if you see that one another structure of myofascial pain here, the continuity, you can see that the gastrocnemius, soleus, and Achilles tendon. I hope all of you can, the image is visible. So the gastrocnemius and soleus, anatomically, or when you are studying, you consider it as a separate unit, these two muscles. And Achilles tendon, which where it gets united, and then it go and inserts of the calcaneum. But it anatomically, your insertion level describe it as insertion at the calcaneal tuberosity. But when you see that in the dissected part, the end of the tendo Achilles is not ends at the calcaneal tuberosity. It further goes in continuation with the plantar of aponeurosis. Like this, the entire chain systems in the myofascial chain systems also influence on the specific muscles or individual muscles. We'll also go through these details about this myofascial chain systems, how it influence on the muscle pain and treatment. So therefore, the Boris has stated that if all the organs and tissues were removed from the body, only with the fascia kept intact, one would still have the replica of human body. So that is the weightage of this entire myofascial chain systems, gives the framework to the human body. That's the importance of this fascia. Therefore, whenever you're treating in the patients with my muscle pain. So what we have discussed about the trapezius pain, focus should not be only on this trapezius muscle, where you usually perform the treatment or evaluate the treatment, evaluation or giving treatment. Not only it should not be focused only on the trapezius muscle. You should also think about the trigger point view, where the trigger points also can induce the pain in the muscle. And also you should also think look into the entire respective facial chain systems. So the muscle what I showed was the trapezius muscle. So if you see that the trapezius muscle is linked with the superficial back arm line. The superficial back arm line, it's a continuity start from the if you see the superficial back line, continue to start from the trapezius muscle, where it's getting connected from the spine, then it goes to the arm region, the shoulder region, and also it passes to the arm region and ends at the extensor tendons of the retinaculum. So as I told you, the facial chain system is a continuity. When you has a view in the anatomy, when you're studying anatomy, you will study the structures separately, like trapezius muscle as an individually, deltoid as a separate muscle. But we never study the connectivity between the structures in between that. But these connectivity structures are all defined as meridians, because there are different meridians. We'll see that later during the presentation. Just a minute. So if you see that much more clear image of this superficial back arm line, you can observe here the trapezius muscle, which is getting connected with the fascia and interconnected fascia and deltoid, then brachialis muscle, and then extensor muscles of the forearm, and the tendons is moving up to the fingers. So that's how the connectivity it forms. So if anyone, if is suppose if they're considering this trapezius muscle as an individual component, the treatment may be ineffective. So therefore, you have to consider the entire myofascial chain system concept when you are treating patients with any structures related to that. So the approach to the myofascial system always should be considered in the fascia in the system as fascia and system of trigger point complex. Whenever the fascia system you are considering, you should consider the myofascial meridian, how all the muscles are interconnected in the forming the entire meridian, and the fascia also covering that meridian, which is a supporting framework. You should also see the problems related to that also. So problems related to meridian you should evaluate, problems related to fascia you should evaluate, and also problems related to the trigger point also you should evaluate whenever you're considering the approaching to the myofascial system whenever patient reports to you. So let me go in depth related to the muscle component or trigger point complex. Then later I'll be explaining you about the meridian concept. The myofascial component or trigger point component, the concept always commonly uses myofascial pain syndrome. So they always keep it as MPS. So whenever a patient comes to you, suppose if I take suppose if I take patient coming to you with trapezius pain, so the patient reporting the pain in the trapezius and also coming pain in the upper limb. But if it is not radicular pattern, then the diagnosis usually named it as myofascial pain syndrome. And if the patient is having specific points, usually the diagnosis it is made it as myofascial trigger points. But what happens? This may not be always right. We should see in little more in depth related to the trigger point complex. Let's see what is this myofascial pain syndrome. See, Simon's Travel and Simons. Really, I the Travel and Simons. Simons, she is a well-known author who studied a lot about myofascial pain syndrome, and her famous book Travels and Simons on myofascial pain syndrome is a world-famous book. It's always a recognized book. So she has done lots of research and published a book related to myofascial pain syndrome, and also she explained an in-depth information related to the individual muscles, how the trigger points myofascial pain symptoms are presented by the patient. Now, um, sorry for interruption.
Excuse me, sir. Vinod, sir.
Some sound is coming actually.
Yes, sir. Vinod, sir.
Yeah, madam.
Someone is requesting to want to see the previous slide. They want
Previous
to see
slide?
the chart, I think. Yeah, the chart one.
Okay, fine. I'll just move on.
Yes, I think so.
So I like to explain.
Yeah.
So whenever, ma'am, I am audible.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Ma'am, some sound
I'll
is
mute.
coming
I
from
will mute. Please,
okay,
participant, please.
Thank you very much. See, whenever you're approaching the this myofascial system, you should consider as a fascia component and trigger point complex component. When it comes to the fascia component, the entire meridian you should consider, and also the fascia which is covering this the meridian, which includes muscle, tendon, and interconnecting fascia between the two muscles or two tendons. This entire fascia you need to understand in relations to their symptoms, in relations to their evaluation, and also in relations to the treatment. Similarly, in the other side, you should also understand the trigger point complex. How these trigger points can induce myofascial pain and how the patient presents, then how you can approach in the treatment. So I'll just go to the definition of myofascial pain syndrome. It's condition. See, it's not considered as a disease or a disorder. It's considered as a condition because it can be treatable and it can be curable sometimes, unless some cases with underlying pathology or diseases. So it's condition caused by hyper-irritable areas. Hyper-irritable areas called myofascial trigger points. So these hyperirritable areas, some myofascial trigger points, are within the taut bands of skeletal muscle or fascia. Taut bands. I'll just come to that. Another definition, which I wanted to put it here, which I found much more complete definition. It's I'm taking pen. Okay. So another definition where I wanted to put it, it's a painful site in the muscle and characterized by myofascial trigger point. So these painful sites or myofascial trigger points produces motor abnormalities and also sensory abnormalities. Even sometimes autonomic abnormalities also can be seen in these trigger point due to these trigger points. So what is this motor abnormalities, sensor abnormalities, which we can see is we should understand about the trigger point concept. See, the travel again defined that this trigger points as it's a hyper-irritable spot in skeletal muscle and is associated with hypersensible palpable nodule in a taut band. I'll just put a little elaboration here. If you look at the image on the right hand side, the trigger point complex. See the trigger point complex, if you much more focus and see it, it consists of a sarcomeres, contracted state of the sarcomeres. Whatever you are observing, um, whatever you are observing in this image, where you can observe there are contracted states of sarcomere. Individual filaments, whatever you're saying, it's a sarcomere, which is present in the myofibril. So these sarcomeres are in a contracted state, and this contracted state together, what it forms is the trigger point complex. But what happens, this this trigger point complex, whenever it's forming through the group of contracted sarcomere, excuse me, contracted sarcomeres will together forms the trigger point complex, and that state we can feel that there is some palpable nodule. See, the nodule size always differs. It can be it may not be sometimes palpable, but it is sometimes painful. Even the thought band also, many times it is not palpable, but when you palpate it, if it's symptomatic trigger point, it is, you can also feel the tenderness in that trigger point complex area. So this trigger points usually induces motor dysfunction, sensory dysfunction, and autonomic phenomena also in the trigger points. So, but what I wanted to inform here is what does it matters in relation to myofascial trigger point? See, these trigger points are located in the motor end plate zone, where the motor nerve when it's connecting to the muscle, and that end plate zone where the trigger points get formed. So that zone, you can also call it as innervation zone, where the alpha motor neurons gets divided or branch out to form connecting to the many muscle fibers. But this motor end plate zone are many times it is specific to the muscles. So some muscles will have at the middle of the middle belly of the muscle. Some muscles it may not get the middle belly, it can be spread out. So it again depends upon the unipinnate muscle or multipinnate muscle. Therefore, the entry of the nerve or motor end plate zone, it can differ among the muscles. So I wanted to audience to have a note on this, because later I'll be discussing about the location of the trigger points specific to the muscles. Because you should understand that motor entry zone is not uniform to the all the muscles. It can differ, but our standard, it will the motor entry zone usually present at the middle region of the muscle belly. Well, why this trigger point is formed? Because this is also matters here. You should all know about this, because whenever patient is coming to you, the patient duration of the onset, duration or onset of the symptoms differs. See, the trigger points may see, first you can all of you can observe the flow chart. Whenever there is a chronic repetitive trauma, like for example, it could be prolonged stretch of the muscle position, or it could be contracted state of the muscle, or if the muscle is weak and not enough endurance to overcome the work. Okay, usually what you can see, even whenever the individual uses more computer and their muscle is not fit enough, and they were too much stretch for long period of time or too much contracted for long period of time, it causes chronic repetitive trauma. So in that case, what happens, there are, as this repetitions keeps happening, chemicals and mechanical mediators keeps inducing and causing sensitive nerve endings to get sensitized. Usually this will happen at the particular muscle. So that entire stage, what you call it as sensitile loci, usually this happens at motor end plate. Motor end plate, the sensitive loci, usually it happens at the motor end plate. During this situation, patient, the entire for first in these three stages, right, the patient keeps discomfort and they keep doing self stretching or yawning, or somehow they keep managing squeezing by themselves muscle or adjusting the posture. They keep changing, adjusting it. What happens, the muscle keeps getting changes and getting relieved, and some of the stage adaptation that keeps happening. But what happens if it is prolonged for longer time, the sensitive loci can become a latent trigger point. The latent trigger point. So this latent trigger point, when it forms, then there is a formation of taut band, and the fibers, whatever is in the contracted state, will result in taut fibers. So usually this scenario also sometimes you may not come across in your clinical practice, because patient maybe start making by themselves self-relieving measures by applying some heat application or ice application or stretching by themselves. They will not may not be much paid attention to the latent trigger points. I'll be telling you why how what I mean by latent trigger points and how a patient can present with latent trigger points when I'm talking about clinical characteristics of the trigger points. The next, if this further progressed, if the patient not evaluated his ergonomics, not checked and corrected his posture or muscle strength, muscle flexibility, not maintained very good strength. So what happened if further continued, these latent trigger points can become a active trigger point. See, both latent trigger points and active trigger points both are asymptomatic trigger points, whereas sensitive loci is not a symptomatic trigger point. It's not a symptomatic, as latent trigger points and active trigger points are symptomatic. But why here in the latent trigger points, the most feature what you can see is the presence of referred pain and the local twitch response. Whereas that referred pain local twitch response is not seen in the latent trigger point, but the trigger point is sensitive. Therefore, many times patient, if they have chronic trauma or acute trauma, like suddenly they got injured, suddenly they went into vigorous activities, or suddenly they went into continuous workload. So at the time, they no need to pass on all the stages. They can the patient may directly develop an acute trigger point which can induce referred pain. So these are the different scenarios the pathophysiology of the trigger points can develop with the patient. And if you see at the molecular level, the pathophysiology of trigger point development is because of the various factors. The one of the factor is the preference is the acetylcholine. In case of micro trauma or macro trauma, whenever there is a injury or trauma, so the acetylcholine can be released excessively, where the acetylcholine triggers the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The sarcoplasmic reticulum contains calcium storage. So the calcium is a crucial part of muscle contraction as well as muscle relaxation. But what happens if the muscle calcium is excessively released, or if the shortfall of calcium, the sarcomere behaves abnormally. It can remain in a state of contraction. Whenever a muscle goes in a state of contraction, what happens? It compresses the blood vessels, and if the inflammatory mediators notices that there is something wrong happening in the area of motor end plate zone, so what happens? The sensitizing enzymes keeps releasing and activating the C fibers, and the patient start feeling the nociception. So this nociception is quite painful and irritable also. Therefore, this kind of nociception is highly present in the case of acute trigger points. Therefore, sometimes these acute trigger points can give a referred pain, strong referred pain. So this process can happen. So this is how the entire pathophysiology I am putting in a briefly over here. But if you go into much more detail, it's a big explanation which cannot be done here in a short period of time. Next, whenever what are the characteristic features of this trigger point? See, as I told you, in the trapezius, or if you take any muscle in the body, there are end plate zones. There are chances of forming of the trigger points. So whenever a patients come to trigger points like trapezius pain, they may report with micro or macro trauma. Don't think that trauma is like it should be an RTA kind. It could be a continuous sustained muscle, continuous contraction, sustained muscle contraction, or overstretch, or overactivated, or it could be too much used, like overused muscle. Any of these can be considered as micro trauma. And they may also come with local or referred pain. See, if it's a local pain where they're specifying is some particular point, it's usually related to the latent trigger points. That means you should consider that that patient is having onset of this pathophysiology since many days or many weeks, but now the patient came to a latent trigger point stage, and if they have referred pain, it is shows that it's an active trigger point. So that means it's a strong history of formation of the trigger point. Then the patient may also complain pain during muscle contraction. They find difficulty to move and they feel stiff in the particular movement respect to the muscle, and also they feel the restricted joint motion due to muscle stiffness, and also they feel weak also due to the pain. So, and also patient may sometimes also report that when certain points related to the most painful points in relation to the muscle. And apart from this, they may or may not come with the associated muscular conditions. For example, if I have spoken about trapezius pain, they may be associated with the cervical spondylosis, or it could be any other cervical conditions, or maybe shoulder-related problems. So in those problems also, they may develop all these trigger points, and they may present with all these symptoms. And the referred pain, I was talking about active trigger point and the referred pain pattern. See, the referred pain, the presentation of trigger points is totally different. It's not like a regular pain where you can see in a nerve root pattern, or a parasitic pattern, a parasitic pain, or you can see particular dermatomal pattern. So here the referred pain is very specific to the trigger point, where Travel and Simons really, she did a great work researching all these trigger points and explaining about the referred pain patterns. So the referred pain could be a proximal projection or distal projection. Either it can go. It cannot be like radiculopathy or parasitic sensation where you see the distal presentations. But in the referred pain, in relation to the trigger point, it cannot be that. It could be a proximal projection or distal projection. For example, if you see in the image over here, the referred pain coming down from the biceps brachii, biceps brachii contains two central trigger points. It can refer pain to the shoulder region. Similarly, if you see a referred pain in the trapezius muscle consists of TRP1, which gives referred pain to the lateral side of the neck and also to the lateral side of the frontal region. So this is how the pattern differs. Sometimes referred pain could be the entire lower limb also. That let's see when I'm talking about individual muscles, I'll be showing you some of the images related to that. So when you are examining the patient, you can continue with your regular evaluation, musculoskeletal evaluation procedures, but there you should observe the physical findings, especially when you are doing palpation method, because palpation is a crucial diagnostic tool for the trigger points evaluation. But there you can find the presence of taut band, which is not always necessary, because sometimes taut band may be small and through your hand it may not be palpable. Then you can also you should have the painful nodule some on palpation. This also again depends upon the size of the nodule. If the chronic, the nodule is a little bigger. If it's acute, nodule may be a little quite small, but it's not easily palpable. And also it depends upon the depth of the presence of the trigger point. So some trigger points are too deeper, which may not be palpable easily. Some trigger points which are superficial and superficial muscles, you can palpate the trigger point easily. And also you can check for the limited range of motion and painful muscle weakness. Then also you can see the positive stretch sign. So whenever you stretch a particular pain muscle where having pain, so the patient may report increased pain sometimes, or also may decrease pain. These are the physical findings you can consider when you're looking for myofascial trigger point pain. Then there's a diagnostic criteria which you should consider. If during your history as well as with your evaluation, objective evaluation, if you found that if there is a discrete nodule along with the taut band, then you should have spot tenderness within the taut band or focal tenderness. When you apply digital pressure, there should be taut tenderness, focal tenderness. And also sometimes if it's an active trigger point, there's a chance of reproducing referred pain. When you apply digital pressure and hold it for few seconds or few counts, the pain may reproduce. And also during active trigger point, if it is present, if you palpate something, you can also feel the local twitch response. Usually this local twitch response only presence in the active trigger points, not in the latent trigger points. The most crucial sign is the digital pressure. Whenever you give digital pressure exactly over the trigger point or the painful point and apply little pressure, suddenly the patient start moving their area of the muscle. So that sign we call it as jump sign, which usually a particular sign you can see in trigger point evaluation. So this findings, if it is there, then you can consider that it's a trigger point. But these are the what you usually used to practice in the clinical. But what's missing in the entire clinical features or in the location of the trigger points, or if you say in the diagnostic criteria, there are certain things which is missing, which wanted to tell you today in this webinar. See, whenever the trigger point comes to you should see that whether it's a primary trigger point or secondary trigger point, acute or chronic or active, latent or passive, and central trigger point attachment and satellite trigger point. See, if it's primary, there is no any underlying pathology. The patient is coming only presence of trigger points in the particular muscle, then your approach will differ. If it is secondary trigger point, usually secondary to the some conditions, musculoskeletal condition, or it could be any other condition. For example, development of trigger points in the trapezius muscle due to cervical spondylosis, it is a secondary trigger point. If patient don't have any problem related to cervical spine, then the patient is developing trapezius trigger point, then it's a primary trigger points. Then approach will differ. Where you are in the secondary trigger point, you have to consider both condition as well as the muscle. Whereas the primary, you have to consider the muscle plus the entire myofascial chain system and various other factors. And acute and chronic, acute usually sudden onset, and chronic is recurrent, where the patient keeps coming to you with repetitive onset of the pain. So this is where the myofascial chain and the trigger point entire system is important whenever you're treating with the chronic cases. Whereas acute cases, right, usually acute trigger points, if it is first time or second time, it resolves by itself, or if it's painful sometime, they may come to physiotherapy, or they might also taken some medicines under prescription by orthopedician. So they that will resolve. But if it's recurrent, then only it will become chronic trigger point. But the most important what you should see is the active trigger point, latent and passive trigger point, which is clinically important for you to evaluate the trigger point and also to understand the pain patterns, how the patient presents to you. Let's see the active trigger points. As I told you before, also I'm just giving a brief points related to this active trigger point. So the active trigger points are the trigger points which are symptomatic, okay, which are symptomatic, but it keeps giving referred pain. So, for example, if you see that if you observe in the image, the quadratus lumborum, it has four trigger points. So when it's superficial and deep trigger points. Whereas the deep trigger points, if it became active, it keeps giving referred pain to the gluteal region, usually at the sacroiliac joint level and also the midpoint between the inferior gluteal line. So therefore, what happens? Patient may have trigger point over there. Yes, the patient may complain pain in the local region, but the pain intensity is higher at the referred region. So again, there's a pillover and uh, the concentration of the pain over the specific area can also be seen. And the dotted area, or whatever the pain you're seeing, is the spillover area where it may vary from individual to individual. Whereas the red area, usually majority of them report that the location of the pain in that region. Similarly, if you take the trapezius muscle, the upper trapezius TRP2 and TRP3, here you can see that these trigger points are latent trigger points, which is not giving much referred pain. It's like a spillover pain. Even you can observe in this trapezius muscle. So all these trigger points, whenever it's giving all the trigger points, whenever it gives referred pain with or without digital pressure, then it can consider as active trigger point. But if the trigger point is not giving any referred pain, but is causing the pain and symptoms, then it is a latent trigger point. Here you can also should see the one more difference is active trigger points are more painful. Okay, you referred painful, whereas latent trigger points may not much painful, but they restrict the movement of the muscle badly. If the movement is limited and the flexibility is reduced, the patient reports that they're feeling stiff most of the time. Then if you see that the presence of latent trigger points in that region, then based on the location, the central trigger point, attachment trigger point, and satellite trigger point, even this is very important. See, if you look at that image over here, the trigger point which is present in the belly of the muscle, okay, belly of the muscle, these trigger points are called central trigger points. The trigger points which are present over the musculotendinous junction or tendino-osseous junction, okay, the junction between the muscle and tendon, or tendon and the bone, or so those junction areas, what you call it as attachment trigger points. They are present at the attachment area of muscle and tendon, or tendon on bone. So these attachment trigger points, clinically they present with strong referred pain. When they become active, right, they are so strong that the patient may feel that something is throbbing kind of pain. So there is a importance of this attachment trigger point. Whereas latent trigger points use pain, but they limit badly the movement of the muscle. The muscle freeness won't be appear. That is the difference between an attachment trigger point and central trigger point. So the referred pain is stronger in the attachment trigger point. Whereas satellite trigger point is another concept. For example, the movement associated in the cervical region in relation to the shoulder, there are other muscles also are involved. The muscle or levator scapulae, rhomboides major minor, even splenius capitis and cervicis was cervical region. So what happens if the one muscle has started developing trigger points, inducing inflammation and also inducing pain and symptoms? Even the associated muscles, what you call the friends, like if you one student wants to go a movie, what happens? He will spoil the other friend to take him for a movie to accompany him. So that's how the muscles, if it become chronic and developing trigger points, it starts inducing development of trigger points even in the associated muscles. So those muscles, whatever you see, is a trigger point, satellite trigger point. And even the associated muscles may not be in the surrounding area; it can be also at the distal area also. The satellite trigger points also is important to understand the presence of pain in the primary location of the trigger point area and also the uh, associated muscles in the development of trigger point. Therefore, whenever you in your clinical practice, the missing part you should not miss it, but actually it's missing part. The concept of active trigger point, concept of latent or passive trigger point, central attachment trigger points, and satellite trigger point. This is an important thing you should consider in your clinical practice. See, uh, another missing point is every muscle. See, many times I have observed, even I have seen that many of the physiotherapists reporting that this whenever applying trigger points, I'm unable to feel the trigger point, unable to palpate the trigger point. Also they say that the trigger point release whatever they're giving is finding ineffective. So there are so many things, many of them are getting failed in the treatment of trigger point. The first concept, the missing part I wanted to put here is that, see, note that every muscle is presented with a specific location of trigger points. The Travel and Simons has very well explained about this, where there may be slight changes, but majority or the locations are very particular. Because when I am treating many patients with trigger point therapies, I've seen that majority out of 195 patients are reporting the exact location of the trigger points presence over there. For example, if you say the trapezius, you cannot in the trapezius muscle. The trapezius muscle, you no need to search entire muscle area to find a trigger point. You should go with specific location. Similarly, if you see sternocleidomastoid mustard, you have clavicular part and the sternal division. If you see that the clavicular division, sternal division, then the location of trigger points in the intima arc. You can observe that in the intima arc, where the trigger points are located in the sequence, and those trigger points are very particular and easily palpable whenever you are examining for the patient. Similarly, in the backside of the neck, you will see that the splenius capitis muscle has one trigger point, which is one of the commonly involved trigger point, keeps inducing pain to the vertex area, and also it keeps giving pain into the suborbital region. And also one more trigger point is related to the splenius cervicis, which is one trigger point, lower trigger point, which keeps inducing pain in the base of the neck. Like this, every trigger point, the location of the trigger point is very well established and the location is much more clear. You should learn that each muscle, which trigger point is located at what level and how to evaluate that. And also the referred pain pattern for each trigger point also developed, and these trigger points keeps giving referring pain to the particular area. So that also you should understand in the treatment of trigger point and evaluation of trigger point. Similarly, if you see that the scalenus muscles gives specular radicular type of symptom. You see the pectoralis major and minor. Pectoralis major gives pain in the medial aspect of the arm. You imagine if a patient is coming to you pectoralis muscle and scalenus muscles involvement, in a combination, they produces radicular type of symptoms. And also levator scapulae. Levator scapulae contains central trigger points. Therefore, it gives pain that more in the muscle area and spill referred pain over the surrounding area. So that's the importance of each muscle contains each particular location of trigger point, and it has particular symptoms it shows whenever it becomes active. Similarly in the quadriceps, then peroneal muscles, then extensor muscles. I'm just ending up these views because there are so many muscles, trigger points, whichever you can see it. Now, whenever you're evaluating in the myopathy trigger point, kindly consider the history. So the time from the day where they find discomfort, then you can also ask the patient about detailed history related to their workstation, or how many hours they work, whether they go for regular exercises, or they're following any dietary patterns. So these are very crucial, important to understand the chances of development of trigger point. But when it comes to the examination part, I am emphasizing more on to the palpation part. See, range of motion, muscle flexibility, strength, and all usually commonly done. But when it comes to trigger point evaluation and myofascial chain evaluation, the palpation is a crucial part here, because this will give the 70% of the information related to the trigger point diagnosis. See, you have to understand that whenever you're palpating, as I told you that the trigger point location is very specific to the muscle, and its location is very specific to the area. Therefore, you should understand how to isolate a muscle first and then go for the trigger point palpation. In the trigger point palpation, the common mistake what most of them does, and what is the missing part in their practice is that they usually take thumb and they'll start putting pressure and applying deep pressure. See what happens, already trigger point is sensitive. Whenever they apply digital pressure, it increases pain there, and the sensitivity becomes more. So it will hampers the diagnostic procedures. Therefore, the most standardized method you can use for the myofascial trigger point evaluation is you can use three kind of palpation methods. One is flat palpation, pincer palpation, and deep or probing palpation. So during palpation, for the trigger point, you should observe that is there any tendon nodule, or is there any taut band, and then is there any dump sign is present, is there any referred pain. So these signs you should observe during your palpation. So the flat palpation, usually the flat palpation is just performed by moving the skin forward, and then again leaving the skin and going pressing the deeply and palpating this. Anyhow, I'll see if I can show you this as a practical demonstration regarding this flat palpation and pincer palpation. Then the pincer palpation, you're going to hold the muscle, and this flat and pincer palpation both are good for superficial muscles, which is easily to palpable. In these cases, what happens? The pincer palpation, you pick the some point of muscle and you try to roll it up and slowly leave it. During the rolling, you should observe the any taut band or trigger point is located in the muscle. So that's how the pincer palpation is done. And pincer palpation will be usually performed taking a small amount of quantity of muscle fibers. I move and shifting the hand to the other areas of the muscle fibers. Then the flat and pincer palpation. Flat is good for superficial muscles. Pincer palpation, which is commonly used palpation for most of the muscles, and good for palpating the trigger point. Even flat palpation and pincer palpation, when you apply deeply with a deep pressure, either flat or pincer palpation. So then you can call it as a deep or probing palpation. And this is you can perform moving slightly the muscle or the joint, and where you can see the muscle is getting relaxed, or the superficial muscles getting relaxed, and you are able to access to the deep muscles. That's how the deep muscles can also be palpated with the deep or probing palpation to find out the location of the trigger points. And the another missing part is many times if you found the trigger points in those cases, see sometimes trigger points may see in many of the orthopedic or musculoskeletal conditions like radiculopathies, joint dysfunction, disc pathologies, or even tendinitis. But this is usually seen in case of secondary myofascial trigger points. But if it is become a primary myofascial trigger points, but the trigger points can induce these kind of conditions, symptoms like these kind of conditions. So then it is a primary trigger point, but there's no any radicular pathology for radiculopathy. There's no any pathology seen for the disc, or there's no any pathology related to carpal tunnel syndrome. but still the symptoms are generated due to these trigger points, then it is called as primary trigger points. Another missing part you should understand here. See, the pain pattern. Whenever you evaluate the trigger point, the symptoms trigger point is not at all sufficient. As I told you that one concept is that every muscle has specific location of trigger point, it's specific referral pattern. But the referral pattern can also be a mixed up pattern. For example, in case if you say a patient is complaining pain in the mid thoracic back pain, if a patient is complaining pain in the mid thoracic back pain, the pain could be due to the development of trigger points, active trigger points in more than one or two muscles. So in that cases, what happens? There is a mixed features of referred pain takes place, which you should understand that the pain pattern in these areas. Let me talk about the mid thoracic back pain. If a patient complaining mid thoracic back pain, you no need to search for a specific trigger point or one particular trigger point. But in this pain pattern, as very well as, established by the Travel and Simon, this is that the muscles which can cause this mid thoracic back pain involves rhomboides major minor trigger points, levator scapular trigger point, spinalis and longissimus muscle trigger points, then serratus posterior superior muscle trigger point. Then you should start evaluating those trigger points and treat those trigger points. Similarly, every region, depending on the pain pattern, there are list of muscles you should evaluate and start examining those trigger points and start treating the trigger point. Similarly, if you say front of the arm, it could be brachialis and biceps brachii, and also the pain coming from the deltoid muscle also. So that's the importance of pain pattern, which is a missing part in the regular practice. Similarly, if you take in the thigh region, the patients coming to you with lateral thigh pain, maybe they may not have any underlying pathology, especially in the young middle-aged people, where the knee all seems fine, but still they may complain pain in the lateral thigh pain, or in the lateral knee pain, or lateral thigh pain, or mid thigh pain. Mid anterior thigh pain, which is commonly seen, which I've seen many cases where they feel they complain lots of discomfort over there. It's because of trigger points in the quadriceps muscle. What happened? The quadriceps muscle contains central trigger points, so usually it gives strong localized pain in that area. So that's about that. Therefore, in the muscle component, I would like to summarize here what usually you might have considered about the concept of myofascial pain and myofascial trigger point. But the missing part I wanted to elaborate here is you should identify the type of trigger point and its specific location of trigger point, which is the information is available in the Travel and Simons book. You can go through that and you will get an idea which trigger point to be evaluated. You'll also see the specific pain pattern in relation to the trigger point. So I suggest that take a mixed pain pattern location, and there are specific muscles mentioned for it. You can examine those muscles and check for which muscle is causing the referred pain, which is easy for your evaluation, also diagnosis. Then you should consider the symptoms mimics as conditions and also conditions causing the trigger point, both. See, if a patient is coming to you cervical spondylosis, no doubt the pain due to the spondylosis may be minimal, but in such cases, pain due to the trigger point is at higher range. So you should consider that trigger points as a primary importance than treating the condition. Similarly, if there is no any pathology, underlying pathology, then still the patient may show the symptoms, and that also you should differentiate in the trigger point complex. So this will hand up at the muscle component and trigger point component. In short, I would like to put up the muscle chain system, then we'll finish off the management part. See, muscle chain system, if you see this, there are different lines. I told you the most of the time the focus is only on the individual muscles or surrounding muscles, but understanding this myofascial chain system or muscle chain system is very important. And it has been even found evidence also is found that these chains are present in humans, and it's published in 2016 by Wilkie. So let's see with the different chain systems. See, this I told you, all is all connecting between the muscles and fascia in the human body. So here it matters here. See why this matters here. The muscle, if you see that So this is not the original table what I've taken. I've started from this article. I'm acknowledging that here. We must say the myofascial chains, there are different names provided for it. Superficial backline, superficial front line, back functional line, front functional line, spiral line, and lateral line. You can see that each myofascial chain consists of the specific muscles. I'll just take an example here, superficial backline. It starts from the plantar fascia, Achilles tendon, then gastrocnemius, then it move up to the hamstrings, then it move up to the sacrotuberous ligament, lumbar fascia, rectus spinae, and it passes up to the head. So this is the image of superficial backline. You all can observe in this image. So it starts from the lower part, plantar fascia, then it passes to the lower part, passes to the gastrocnemius, hamstring, sacrotuberous ligament, rectus spinae, and up to the epicranial fascia. So this entire, as per the sources available, when they try to dissect this entire chain, right, they can see, they found that it's in continuity. So in the continuity in the structure. Every myofascial chain, it has its own unique functions. It helps in postural function plus movement function, both. So postural function means it gives stability, shape to the body, and in movement function it comes right. It provides the stability during the dynamic movements. So all the myofascial chain systems together, it forms and gives the stability to the body during static posture as well as dynamic posture, and it also helps in transmitting the force from one segment to the other segment in the human body. I have taken one example here in this webinar, only talking about the superficial backline, whereas I'm not going with all the other chains because I want to put it in short. See if there is any problem related to the superficial backline. As I told you, superficial backline start from plantar fascia up to the epicranial fascia. There could be the overall chain can get affected if anywhere if you see the deviations. One thing you should observe here is, see for example, if you're two people are holding a rope at two sides, right? If one person pulls at the other side, what happens? Other person also gets pulled. So therefore, the fascia also acts as the entire as a rope. So you cannot separate this entire chain. It acts as a single rope. So when one segment has to move, other segment also should release or relax. Then the mobility of this entire fascial chain system should be normal. So if it is found abnormal, in that cases, it can limit ankle dorsiflexion, knee hyperextension can cause absence shortness, antipelvic shift, sacral notation. So it's all interrelated. So then the patient may find symptoms or pain or discomfort in any of the entire segment area. So whenever we are evaluating this myofascial chain system, we'll check for their posture and we'll see for any deviations observed in each segment area. Then we'll check for it. The mobility of this entire chain can also be observed in the by making the subject to go with a particular type of movement. So one of the movement you can see that the lower limb stretch and bending forward. This one movement will help in to see for the flexibility of the entire chain. Then this front line, I'll just showing you the images, but I'm not going much in detail here. See, the front line will forms like this. Start from the sternocleidomastoid muscle and goes to the anterior part, rectus abdominis, then quadriceps muscle, then anterior leg muscles, and get connected to the lower limb. Similarly, the lateral line, which is present at the both right side and left side bilaterally, usually formed by the sternocleidomastoid muscle, then goes with the intercostal muscles, then IT band, then goes to the peroneal muscles. So a spiral line, which is very, very important to myofascial chain for stability and mobility, because if the spiral line system is having a problem, it also affects the other myofascial chain systems. This spiral line, which is present bilaterally, and it takes a twist at the foot area and also at the lumbar area. So therefore, this is a very important chain in the myofascial chain. Whereas the arm lines, which is very important here, because I wanted to pay attention over here. See, in the arm lines, you have a superficial arm line and a deep arm line. You see the superficial front arm line and deep front arm line. You can observe that it starts from the pectoralis muscle in the superficial area, whereas start from the pectoralis minor in case of deep front arm line. It passes up to the metatarsal phalanges. Similarly, if you say the back side, okay, that is related to the front, this is related to the front. When it comes to the back, similarly, you have in the back side deep and superficial. So the superficial back arm line starts from the trapezius, deltoid, brachialis, then extensor muscles. Whereas deep back arm line, here you can see this rhomboides, levator scapulae, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, triceps, okay, and it's passing up to the little finger. Therefore, why this myofascial chain is so important? As a functional line, which is a combination of muscles like pectoralis, rectus, and then adductor. Similarly, in the back, latissimus dorsi, gluteus maximus, and vastus lateralis. So the deep front line. So let me move on to the next slides because this is all too elaborated one. So what's missing in concept of myofascial chain system in your clinical practice? See, as I told you, patient, suppose if the patient is coming to you with pain, what you should understand is very important. See, let me take these myofascial chain systems. The entire chain contains tracks, stations, and switches. This is very important here to understand relations to your clinical practice. So tracks, which consist of formation of chain of the muscles. See here, if you see this, you have the gastrocnemius, hamstrings, then rectus spinae. But these muscles are interconnected with the communicating fibers, that is anatomical trains. Yeah, but if you see these tracks are supported or inserted at the bony stations. The bony station is nothing but insertion points of the particular muscle or tracks. So that bony stations, if you observe, you have the greater tuberosity over here, lateral epicondyle, middle epicondyle over here, and even the sternoid process of the ulna. Why this is important? See, you should understand that I want to put your one condition over here. Let me take the lateral epicondylitis or middle epicondylitis. If you see that the problem usually for lateral epicondylitis is the tendo-osseous junction. Now, the supraspinatus or tendinitis, or even if it's a rotocoph sometimes, again it is near to the tendo-osseous junction. What happens if the tracts are weak, but the load goes on the bony stations? Therefore, this is how the concept of myofascial meridian plays a vital role. You should always note that whenever the load is coming at the bony stations causing problem like tennis elbow or supraspinal tendinitis, there may be weakness in the entire myofascial chain. That means the tracks. So therefore, you should evaluate that and start treating the patient. Again, these myofascial chains also can have switches, roundels. For example, here I shown your image is this abdominal muscles. Similarly, there's a switch can also be seen in the hamstrings, biceps brachiae muscles also. The next, it has expressors and locals also, myofascial chain system, because you should understand why this express and locals are important here. Because expressors nothing but usually I can put in simple words two joint or multi-joint muscles. Locals are single joint muscles. So here, if you see this, the forearm muscles are expressors. The local is the brachialis muscle. Deltoid, again, it is a local muscle, you can say. So it acts on the shoulder joint, where this acts on both the joints. Whenever the muscles imbalance is present between the express and locals, what happens? The locals usually forms as a stability for the entire chain system and helps in controlling the force transmission, whereas expressors are helps in dynamic stability. But whenever the entire myofascial chain is weak, the expressors are prone for getting injured. That's why you can see that many times patients, whenever they are reporting pain, right, they won't report in the entire chain is deltoid is having pain or brachial is having pain. But first preference is they report in the trapezius muscle or forearm muscles. This you usually commonly see in the people who use computer. That's the importance of tracks, stations, and switches. Tracks means they are the muscles which connects between the two muscles. Stations are the bony insertions, whereas switches are the divisions in the muscles, and express and locals are one joint or multi-joint muscles, and locals are the single joint muscles or stability muscles. Next, what you are supposed to consider this as a facial element? So you're considered as a trigger point as an element and its symptoms, but you should consider this fascia also as an element. Here, the fascia is densely innervated by mechanoreceptors. You should note this mechanoreceptors, which is also responsive to the myofascial manipulation. That's why whenever by yourself you have muscle pain or leg pain, right? When you try to squeeze, you are inducing stimulation of mechanoreceptors. Then the fish start relaxing. So there is a one fascia which is having specific feature, mechanoreceptors, and also it is directly connected to the central nervous system, which is very important because whenever patient is had to and wanted to complete some task or physical work, even if they're tired, exhausted, they are able to do it because that's controlled by some nervous system, controlled by the mind. So they can easily they can overcome that workload. If the patient is depressed, not interested, right? Even though if the work is simple, they don't feel like doing, and they feel that they are lazy. So there is a big connection between this. There are so many evidences articles all published related to this, and the literature is available for that. And also, the stimulation of the receptors can trigger the viscosity changes in the ground substance. Note this. See the fascia in the entire body, right? It's highly fluid, and the fluidity or the I can say viscosity of this fascia is very important for the functioning of the fascia. If the viscosity is decreased or increased, if it's decreased, it gets stiffness. If it is increased, it gives stiffness. If it decreases, it gives extensibility. So lots of imbalances can happen over there. Therefore, this fascia is also reacts to the reacts to the trauma also. Now, and the fascia also contains some smooth muscle cells, which is now is going for special interest in the fibromyalgia cases, which still need to be review on that matter. Now, the fascia act as a cybernetic. Cybernetic means getting connection between the connection between the two cells or between the two structures to function normally. So that the fascia also acts as a cybernetic. So for having these many features, but why not we should consider the fascia as one of the elements in treatment of muscle pain. So if you see another properties of the fascia, I'm putting in short over here. Fascia act as a pervasiveness. See, pervasiveness means the fascia is entirely, as I told you, if you consider as a rope, if one side of the rope has to be pulled, other side it has to relax, or it should have an extensibility. Therefore, the junction for this pervasiveness here, the lumbar area acts as a pervasiveness. As I told you, all the meridians will cross over the lumbar area. So for this one limb has to move, other limb has to move, then the fascia should be having that much extensibility. So that extensibility of the fascia is what we call pervasiveness. Then the fascia can also respond to the stimulus, mechanical force. For example, whenever you are moving hand on your limb, or whenever you're moving hand on the patient's painful muscle, they feel relieved and they feel relaxed. That's because of the fascia act as a tissue of plasticity. That means piezoelectric effect. Whenever you put mechanical force, it brings some structural deformation that what you can see in the fascia. And it also acts as a tensegrity, where one structure is the tensegrity means all the elements in the tensegrity should be balanced. Okay, then only the fascia is functional in all the directions. If one structure is imbalanced, or if it is compressed at one place or stretched at other place, what happens? It can create an imbalance the entire chain systems. Not only like one particular chain system, it can affect the entire chain system. Then the patient start feeling discomfort. But this balance is very important for physical trainers, athletes, sports players. Then facial remodeling. Fascia is having an ability to adopt itself. See, whenever you want to trained the physical fitness very well, yes, the fascia can try to take it up and be strong. If there's no any physical activities, the fascia can become weak. And the fascia, if it is left it for longer period of time in one particular position, it can become stiff. If you try to stretch or elongate it, it can elongate. So that's the remodeling that is having adaptability for the fascia in the consideration. Now, what exactly it matters here? So, whenever you're doing evaluation, you should go for the fascia approach and trigger point approach. Both you should consider it. This is a missing part in any of the case when you're treating with the pain. So, if you're going for fascia approach, use soft tissue and techniques to evaluate the fascia. Usually, for the fascia, we see for its function and the postural function, how it does the movement function, then which muscles are responsible. And as I told you about the stations, tracks, all those informations you need to put together to evaluate the fascia. But here, in short, I would like to put here is when you are evaluating the fascia, if you should see the fascia chain, its flexibility and stiffness or any adherence is there. And also you should see for the fascia mobility and motility, ability to elongate, ability to move. So that those things we usually evaluate, but I'm not putting up here for those evaluation procedures because this is completely an objective procedure where you have to feel it, and your hands also need to be trained so well that you should gain that perceiveness of the mobility and motility of the fascia, which is practically you should feel that. Therefore, whenever the patient is having fascia problem, usually they present to you with fascia shortens or solidifies. They feel hard, which is commonly maybe many patients reports regarding this solidifying the thing. Whenever a patient coming to you and saying that whenever they sit and work for a long time in front of computer or when they're working in kitchen and they feel that the muscles in the back and neck getting stiff and hard, right? Then you should consider it's related to the fascia. So therefore, the fascia can become shortened, solidify, and it can become thick. So it could be because of trauma. It can show that it could be emotional, physical injuries to the body. Also, it can show. I told you that fascia is related to the nervous system, and inflammation also it can induce due to poor posture, and also the fascia can give some looseness in related to the physiological adaptive capacity in the humans. Whenever the fascia problem gets, we call it as binding down of fascia. Binding down of fascia. So then whenever there is a binding down of fascia, you should check is there any shortness, solidifying, thickening, then you should start evaluating it and implement your myofascial therapies. So therefore, I will come at the hand of such the treatment of nervous system. Is it considered as a facial component? And considering that there is a tightness or restriction in the movement, or is there any hardness or pain? I should also consider the trigger point complex, the muscle component, where there is any active trigger point, latent trigger points, and spot tenderness and irritability and deferred pain. So whenever there is a muscle component, you should evaluate for the trigger points and muscle tightness and stiffness. If there's any facial component is involved and the patient complains symptoms like to tightness, solidifies, or hardness, then you should check for the facial mobility also. Then the myofascial therapy can be implemented in such scenarios where even the evidence supports on it, where you will be applying low load, long duration stretch. Remember this low load. If you try to stretch with more force and sudden stretch, right, the fascia revert back with a bad situation. This is very important. So always, whenever you want to stretch the myofascial component, go with a low load, long duration stretch. Don't try to be vigorous with the stretch. You should handle delicately this myofascial structure. Many of them fail by reducing the pain due to stretch when they won't follow this, and they feel that MFR is ineffective. Then even the evidences like RCTs, many studies supports on myofascial treatment for its effectiveness in treating fascia and myofascial trigger point. But still, there are much more evidences are required in supporting on many techniques in relation to the myofascial release. So at the hand, you would like to put up here is whenever you feel that there's a fascia getting involved and the patient is feeling stiff or solidifying, then you can go with the direct and indirect myofascial approach, where you have to focus on the superficial fascia and deep fascia. But the response could be a little slow, and you should be very patient and the procedure, entire procedure is followed in a different manner. Whenever the patient is compliant about only the trigger point, but there's no any facial involvement, then you can choose any of these techniques. You can get quick response, dry needling, spray and stretch, trigger point release. Then once these techniques are used, you can go with the duration of the facial stretch, starts from 90 to 120 seconds in case of focusing on specific track, the myofascial chain system. And then you have to be very low pressure. Low pressure should be applied. This is most important. In case of trigger point approach, if you're going, you should always depend upon the tissue barrier. See, this is very important here. You should go with the particular tissue barrier where whenever you're moving to try to stretch or applying pressure, right, you feel some kind of resistance. You should stop at that point, and you should allow the tissue, the fascia and trigger point to respond to you to be softer. Then you should further increase the pressure. That's how the myofascial pain approach should be done. Not suddenly you apply some digital pressure maximally and causing irritation to the pain, irritation to the patient, and increasing the sensitivity of the trigger point. That is not the actual trigger point approach to be followed. It should be very patiently should apply with a less force, with longer duration. You have to feel that barrier of the tissue resistance. And whenever you're doing trigger point manipulation, please follow an appropriate position, draping and support. This is very important. The patient should feel that he is completely relaxed. I told you the myofascial component is completely related to the nervous system. Whenever they feel completely relaxed, then only your effectiveness of the trigger point therapy can be effective. So draping means they should be very well supported and during performing the technique. So coming to the fascia techniques, you have direct techniques, which are not very much. You have skin rolling, compression, stretching, scrapping, and soft tissue techniques. Whereas indirect technique, when you wanted to focus on the deep fascia, you have techniques like standardized pressure, cross and release, longitudinal plane release, compression release, transverse plane release. At last, whenever you're concentrating on the fascia, you have to go with unwinding and myofascial rebonding procedures. So apart from this, you have to teach them the corrective actions, appropriate activities. Don't just advise them to stay rest. Rather than that, try to advise them how to modify their activities and how to improve their strength and endurance levels. That's how we can approach the myofascial structure. If a patient feels sometimes sudden pain, you can also teach them self-myofascial release techniques. There are many techniques are available.
So your audio is not visible.
Okay. Now it is now it's audible, madam. Hello, madam, it's audible. Madam. Okay. Okay. Apart from this, you can do the stretching of the muscle. Don't try to concentrate on the only single muscles, okay, which specific muscle, but try to concentrate on the muscles which are related to the meridian. If it is stiff, if the stiffness is found, so that you can pay attention on that. Then if you want some of the facial stretch exercises, see, these are some of the exercises you can start implementing in your rehabilitation. Where if you want to stretch structures related to social front line, these are the different postures you can use: sun salutation pose and the bridge pose, bow pose. Then if you want to stretch the stretch and increase the flexibility and strength of the superficial backline, these are the poses you can teach the patient, like forward bend pose, child pose. As I told you that each chain is connected with many muscles. So if your patient is having one or two muscles, then you can implement the entire chain to be get trained with the flexibility and strengthening poses. Then you have lateral line for the lateral chain. Then you have spiral line for the spiral pose. You can have pigeon pose for upper spiral line. Again, your lower spiral line, you have lunges and deep warrior pose. You can teach the patient. Even this is available in yoga also. And for in case of arm line, really this is also shown very good effectiveness for frozen shoulder cases also. Superficial front and back arm lines. You can go for cow pose, what you see in the first image, and eagle pose, what you see in the last image in standing. So those poses you can teach for the arm lines. And some of the yogasanas also, which is very well popular, but those asanas also helps in stretching the many chains at a time. You can see that image in the right spiral line, lateral line, and deep front line. Okay, so the key message I would like to put here: whenever you're treating myofascial chain system, okay, even though if it matters for you, whatever you learn, but the missing part you should not miss it. The entire chain and the exercise for entire chain to be considered, and the fascia is one area which is not stretched, right? So therefore, you should evaluate for tightness, restriction, if any pain in the entire chain system. So try to consider that in your myofascial trigger point treatment. And then whenever you're treating, right, the participation by the clinicians and the patient feedback is very important in trigger point therapy as well also myofascial therapy. If because both coordination will help in effective relief in the measures. Then consider the tensegrity principles, where the fascia can be act as a single unit, where it can get imbalanced when one side is compressed, other side gets stretched, so that you should understand. And it can respond to you because it acts as a mechanotransduction. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinod sir. And we are having some questions from participants.
Sure, sure, madam.
Okay, sir. And is there any contraindications for myofascial release?
Yes, yes, there are so many contraindications which are not mentioned intentionally in the presentation. See, if you see the myofascial stiffness is due to chronic inflammatory conditions or systemic diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, truly which is not recommended, and also malignancies which is not recommended. Like that, there are so many contraindications are there, which is most important I have highlighted here. And patients with severe deficiency disorders, where they have severe vitamin D deficiency or psychiatric problems, those situations, myofascial therapies related to the myofascial fascia is contraindicated.
Okay, sir. Another one, that question from Mr. Babu Rajesh. Do we need to treat a whole line?
Yes, because that's what I'm intended to tell today. You have to check the entire myofascial chain for any imbalances there. I told you the tracks, you need to check entire track if there is any imbalances there. One imbalance you can find through the postural changes or positional changes in that. And then another imbalance you can see that the excessive length or stiffness. If that is there, you have to consider the treatment of entire chain. This helps in prevention of recurrence. Trigger point.
Okay, sir. Good, thank you. And one more question. How can we differentiate between radiculopathy and trigger points?
Yes. See, I told you the first you should take the brief history of the patient. If the patient is age factor, one you should consider. The second factor you should see if his underlying pathology already evaluated by the orthopedician. If there are cervical spondylosis, that you should see. The other part, the symptoms presentation. See, in the radiculopathy, they usually complain about parasitic sensations or the parasitic sensation or shocking type of pain. Whereas in myofascial trigger points pain, there is no parasitic sensation is felt, but they get diffuse pain, and the diffuse pain is irritable pain. And is associated with the muscle pain, where when they feel that the particular muscle is getting pain, then only they say that the pain is increased. So that's how you should differentiate. The myofascial pain is dull and deep pain, no specific pain they feel, whereas radiculopathy, parasitic sensation, you need to consider more. Any participants wants to speak, they can. Madam? Hello?
One second,
Yeah.
sir. One second.
Madam, I have a few participants who have raised their hand.
Okay, sir.
Uh,
Okay, so
So I'll
they
just
can ask
unmute
questions.
them so that
Okay.
they can ask the question.
Yes, sir.
Preet Deshpal, you're allowed to talk. Please ask the question.
Hello? I'm not
Preet,
audible.
you
Hello.
Yes, sir, you are audible. You can raise the question.
Madam.
I think his audio is not available. So we go for
Yeah.
some questions from chat box.
Yeah.
Sir, one person named Chesta Sarma is asking, explain jump sign.
See, jump sign, it is usually performed during palpation. Whenever there's a trigger point, that's a local spot tenderness reported by patient as well as you noticed. To confirm that the trigger point is present, you just apply a gradual increase of digital pressure over that trigger point, and the patient suddenly starts moving the entire area. That shows that positive jump sign, and it shows that there is a hypersensible node or nodule or hyperirritable area in that area. If you check in the same sign, the adjacent area, right, they may not show positive sign. Only the trigger point area only they can show this positive sign.
Thank you, sir. And one more question. How is diet pattern related to myofascial trigger points and how to modify it?
See, madam, 1 minute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The
You
question
take
is,
that. How is the diet pattern will affect the myofascial
okay.
trigger points? How can we modify it?
Yes, yes, yes. Diet pattern truly affects many patients reported acute onset of multiple trigger points. I'm not saying one trigger point, it's a multiple trigger points when they are on strict diet. See, the trigger points formation in the pathophysiology for C, the main importance is calcium and the acetylcholine, and also ATP production. Apart from that, the vitamin D, vitamin B12, these are all very important substances. So when they go for diet, they may fall deficiency in vitamin D or calcium. In such cases, they develop acute active trigger points. Therefore, whenever they are wants to go for diet, they should make sure that the diet is balanced very well with the nutritionist opinion. This is highly going to influence because I've seen many, especially female patients with onset of sudden trigger points when they have 3 or 4 days of fasting and means diet to reduce their body weight. They fall with sudden calcium levels decreased. But usually this happens with any previous history of calcium deficiency also.
And one more question, sir. Is there any emotional components involved in developing of physical pathology?
Yes, yes, yes. As I told you, the fascia is directly related to the nervous system, and there are lots of evidences, studies coming up in relations to this study. Yes, emotional. When the patient, if an individual is on depression, they are more chance of developing these trigger points and stiffness in the fascia. One of the factor, one of the condition, what you can see in the fibromyalgia also, where most of the cases of fibromyalgia are related to the emotional levels. Usually they are on psychiatric medicines also they put on. And similarly, if the patient, if individual without fibromyalgia also, their fascia can also become stiff when they are more into depressed or more into the laziness. But patients who are in active, they always feel free in the entire myofascial system.
And one more question from Dr. Danjit Kalita. Any special or specific test for myofascial trigger points?
See, there is no specific test as such, except for ruling out other associated conditions. But the gold standard what depended more on into the palpation method, where you have to see for the signs of a nodule or taut band. If you do it to perform on individual, you can feel that. And this is a jump sign, which is one considered as one of the tests. And snap, even if you say the flexibility test also can be implemented to check for the flexibility of the fascia, but there's no any gold standard test except the diagnostic criteria.
And some of the participants had raised their hand. They can ask question, I think. Dr.
They can enable,
Akshata.
madam. Host can enable their audio.
Okay. Mahendra sir,
Host can enable their audio.
Yes, madam. Yes, I
some
am
of them are
unmuting.
raised
I am
their
unmuting
hand.
them, but
Okay.
the same. And let's get back to asking the question in the chat box.
Nice.
Madam, any questions? There are
There
so
is
many
one more
questions.
question. Can you do something to treat?
Soumya, ma'am?
How to differentiate between muscle pathology and facial pathology? Someone is asking that.
Okay, I saw that. No, madam, can you please repeat the question?
Is there any different? How can we differentiate between muscle pathology and facial pathology? Myofascial.
Okay. See, pathology, when the term, if you're using, when it relates to muscle, there are so many pathological conditions related to muscle. But today I'm just focused on the related to the myofascial trigger points. Okay. So if you see that if the symptoms, if related to complaint of stiffness, hardness in the muscle, decreased movement, okay, and also decreased flexibility of the entire chain, okay, that way you should consider as facial pathology. And the facial pathology, physically we check for the motility of the fascia. Just that's one of the evaluation procedure which is performed in the myofascial evaluation, where you will pass a hand on the fascia. You can feel that the hand should move smooth on the fascia. So if any restrictions is present, you can feel there is a resistance developed in the fascia. There's one you can use it for the fascia to rule out for the facial pathology, facial restrictions. Whereas muscle pathology, I wanted to specify for the trigger points. So you have to check for the symptoms of the trigger points, whether it's latent trigger point or acute trigger point. As I told you, some of the symptoms: presence of pain, spot tenderness, referred pain if it is acute, and no referred pain if it is latent. So these are the features you should consider to differentiate both.
And one more question. Can we treat any metastasis cancer patient with myofascial release treatment?
No, it is not recommended because presently it's contraindicated.
And how much the trigger point needling help in relief of pain? Finally, they came to the topic.
Very good question. I can say, even though there is no much published literature coming up, there are so many systematic reviews, but still there are requirement for isolated studies. But when it comes to the clinical experience, I'm saying you can put 99%. It can help if you are very much accurate with ruling out the trigger point, diagnosing the trigger point. It can help in relieving it, and instantaneous relief. Okay, every day, one or two patients will be there. Obviously, if you want to practice the trigger point, you better get trained well and follow all the legal procedures plus registration procedures, consent forms. So many procedures are there. So I always recommend the trigger point dry needling for the treatment of myofascial trigger point.
Okay. And one more question, the last. Many questions are there, asking many questions.
Yeah, we'll see, man. After time permitted, we will answer
Yes,
them.
sir. Yes, sir. That's what. Can range of motion of muscle be increased with myofascial relief?
Yes. Range of motion of the muscle.
Can range of motion is increased with myofascial release?
Yes, that is the intention of giving myofascial release to improve the flexibility of the fascia and muscle. It improves. You can see 5 to 10% instantaneous improvement if it is not due to trauma, like major trauma or chronic additions. If it's adaptive stiffness or tightness, it will give very good results.
And is there any difference between myofascial syndrome and fibromyalgia?
Structurally, it gives similarity where the presence of trigger points and muscle getting stiff and tight. But what happens when it comes to the pathophysiology, it is different. Whereas fibromyalgia, more they consider into the involvement of emotions and various other factors. Whereas this myofascial syndrome is specifically due to the local factors like muscle decrease in muscle flexibility or weakness or prolonged stretching of the muscle or sustained contraction. These are the factors which develop the myofascial pain syndrome. But still now it is considered as a different entity.
Okay. Mahendra sir, is there anyone is there? Can ask the question directly to Vinod sir.
Well, I think we are running out of time, madam.
Yes, sir. Anyway, more questions are there. We can send Dr. Vinod's email ID. So, because many of them they want a reference and evidence for treat the myofascial
Madam,
release or anything.
some of the questions are, if one or two questions there are there, they're asking related to.
You can please.
So many are there. How we do?
Yes, sir. No, many of them has been answered, sir, already. And some of them they are asking about the references and evidence-based documents to treat the myofascial release techniques. So for them, we can send
See,
the
I kept
references.
references. I kept their own words in each slide. What are the sources I've taken? Not at the end of the talk, because I wanted to quote there itself. And surely we have so many textbooks. Apart from textbooks, the recent references, I kept it in the particular to the slides.
Okay, sir. Anyway, it's a wonderful session, sir. Thank you so much. Mahendra,
thank you
sir?
very much, madam.
Take it up, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Vinod. It's been a very wonderful evening with a lot of inputs from you regarding myofascial release, and I'm sure most of us here would care to more from you. Right? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Soumya,
Thank you, Soumya, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this
for moderating this
opportunity.
session wonderfully. I thank all the participants from Zoom and Facebook Live viewers. I'm very much thankful to take this opportunity to share my knowledge with you all. Thanks a lot. Thanks to Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. Have a
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder here that tomorrow also we have a webinar conducted by Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation on integrated managed therapy of osteoarthritis knee. We have Dr. Pearlson who would be the speaker, and I'm sure he's not new to anybody here in Karnataka, right? So this webinar is going to be moderated by Dr. Raghunath, Assistant Professor, RV College of Physiotherapy. So I wish all the best to them, and would request all the participants to rejoin us and make sure that you're logged in for a good knowledge session. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you all.